We now come to Act 2, and in this act we see that Hamlet has to take action because he has been instructed by the ghost to avenge his father's murder. In order for you to make your knowledge of the plots perhaps more interesting or more memorable, you should at least give each act a heading. You can even do so for the particular scenes, but that would require you to know quite a number of little headings. So in Act 2, we basically have Hamlet's transformation. And the quote that we've extracted from the text is Hamlet's pitiful statement, "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I." So what is a rogue? A rogue is somebody who does not conform to what is expected of him. So in many ways, Hamlet sees himself as a rogue because firstly, he has to act out of character. He has to act differently because he now has to pretend that he's insane. However, we also know that Hamlet has been instructed by the ghost to avenge his father's death. And at this stage, Hamlet is still thinking about it and he has yet to go into action. Act 2, Scene 1, places the action in a room in the house of Polonius, and 2 months have since passed since Hamlet saw the ghost and Claudius had been crowned a king of Denmark. Polonius basically instructs Rinaldo, his servant, to travel to Paris to give Laertes money and letters, but he also instructs him to spy on Laertes and to report to Polonius if his son is indulging in any vice. In fact, he even tells Rinaldo to go as far as to bait people to tell him more about about Laertes by actually, making up something about Laertes' reprobate lifestyle, because Polonius is actually interested in knowing what people think of his son. So Polonius is somebody who's very concerned about his own reputation and is concerned that his children will ruin that reputation for him. Polonius is a meddler. He has no compunctions about besmirching his own son's reputation or about spying on him. So already we pick up that he gives these over-the-top instructions, and in fact, he does not endear himself to the audience because he presents a very comical kind of figure because of the ridiculous things that he says. He thinks that he's extremely intelligent and is extremely witty, and often does not realize that Hamlet, in fact, makes fun of him. At this stage, Ophelia enters and she's extremely upset. Apparently, she tells the story to her father of Hamlet, who had burst into her room and held her wrists and studied her face without saying a word. And apparently, he had left the room and walked towards the door whilst his head had been turned back to look at Ophelia. She mentions that his doublet was all unbraced, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down-gived to his ankles. Now, this is important. His appearance is extremely disheveled. To observers, it would be an indication of a fractured mind. Remember, this is a prince who is supposed to dress very smartly as it is required of him in the position that he is in. His shirt is unbuttoned, his his stockings are soiled and hanging to his ankles, and by all accounts, it must have shocked Ophelia terribly because the once composed prince that she had known is now gone, and in its place is this figure who is pathetically looks like the young prince, but indeed seems to have lost his wits. And please note, the audience, we are aware that Hamlet has now commenced with his plan, namely, it is merely pretense. So the audience is aware that this is only part of Hamlet's plot. And so this is an example of dramatic irony, because neither Polonius nor Ophelia is aware that Hamlet has now embarked very seriously on his quest to avenge his father's death. Polonius then concludes that Hamlet has gone insane because Ophelia had rejected his advances after following her father's advice to stop talking to Hamlet. He says this is the very ecstasy of love. And he actually once again interrogates his daughter and asks, have you given him any words of late? And Ophelia says, no, as you did command, I did repel his letters and denied his access to me. Again, we are cognizant or cognizant of the fact that Ophelia is a subordinate. Her father does not see her as a budding young woman, but merely as a child whom he can command. And here he has stopped her, in a sense, requested of her or commanded her to bottle up her feelings and to deny this, whatever feelings it is that Hamlet has, or she has for Hamlet, and basically to reject those advances. Note, not at any stage does he actually take into account the fact that his daughter might be quite confused, or that she might be feeling feelings of rejection, because this was a young man who had shown quite a keen interest in her. He also decides to share this discovery with the king, and once again he proves to the reader how sycophantic he is, and that he basically does everything to please the king for the obvious reason of then cementing his reputation of loyalty for the king, and once again, like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, probably for the hope of gaining favors from the king. Just remember that when the scene changes, the scene literally changes. So we're moving from one particular venue or location to another. And in this case, in scene 2, it is an audience chamber in Elsinore. What is an audience chamber? This is where the king receives his subjects and makes official announcements. Claudius and Gertrude greet Hamlet's old friends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and we learn that they have been summoned to Elsinore to unravel why Hamlet's transformation or behavior has changed so drastically, sith nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was. And this scene takes place soon after the scene 1, where we now have learned that indeed Hamlet has deteriorated to such an extent that he's almost unrecognizable to Ophelia. We note that Claudius appears to be very gracious, warm, very diplomatic. He knows what to say at the right moment, and he pretends to have Hamlet's best interests at heart. Yet we also know that he is quite deceptive, and we pick that up when he encourages them to actually spy on Hamlet, and he claims that he wants to heal Hamlet of this affliction or illness that is bothering him. He says, I entreat you both, draw him onto pleasures, whether aught to us unknown afflicts him thus, that opened lies within our own remedy. Note, I entreat you both, I plead with you, draw him onto pleasures, have conversations with him, see if, for example, as buddies, you can go out and have some fun, and while you are doing that, discover what it is that is bothering him, and share that with us, so that we can see if we can actually find the remedy or cure indeed for Hamlet's melancholy or insanity. And note, Claudius does not say the word insane or use the word melancholy at this stage. Guildenstern replies, but we both obey and give up ourselves in the full bent to lay our service freely at your feet to be commanded. Very importantly, the audience realizes that these two young men are extremely sycophantic. They show absolutely no loyalty to their childhood friend Hamlet, and we also note that they are incapable of functioning independently. It is as if they are almost like one character. The characteristics are so similar that the one they seem to finish each other's sentences and they speak for each other. They use words like we both obey. Note the pronoun we, suggesting that Guildenstern is a representative of these two individuals. They say they give up ourselves in the full bent. We give ourselves totally to your command. We lay your services at your feet. Note they're actually saying to the king, here we are, we will do everything that you ask of us. Now we have to consider, are they actual opportunists or are they generally concerned about Hamlet's condition? And so for most critics, these young men are seen as opportunists who basically cannot function independently and they cannot think for themselves. Note the sequence in which the king and the queen then part from these individuals. The king says, thanks Rosencrantz and gentle Guildenstern. The queen says, thanks Guildenstern and gentle Rosencrantz. So the fact that their greetings interchange the two characters' names and it mirrors each other's, it indicates that these young men are basically seen as a single person rather than two individuals with two separate mindsets or two separate focuses or foci. Once these two young men have departed, we again see the diplomat, the politician Claudius coming to the fore. Remember that there is the real physical threat of young Fortinbras clamoring to avenge his father's death, and that at the beginning of the drama, Claudius had sent his ambassadors to Norway and they have returned. They basically have returned with the report that young Fortinbras has agreed to stop attacking Denmark. However, what he has requested is that Claudius give him free passage through Denmark so that he can move on to Poland and I assume then reclaim some territory in Poland, and Claudius agrees to this request and the ambassadors leaves. So why does the playwright include this particular scene? It's just a reminder of the political upheaval that existed and how Claudius deals with it in a very suave diplomatic fashion. Remember, he is now trying to get rid of all the threats from without or outside Denmark. However, he still has to and has this huge struggle of any threats inside Denmark itself because the country is in a state of disarray. Polonius comes in and is quite excited because he believes that he knows the root cause of Hamlet's insanity. Note, Polonius thinks that he is of superior intelligence, and he kind of loves showing off this knowledge. It is Gertrude, however, who makes a very astute statement. She says, I doubt it is no other but the Maynie's father's death and our over-hasty marriage. That indicates that Gertrude is not as vacuous or stupid as we are made out to believe. It's quite an insightful statement, and although it isn't developed, we can see that indeed she is spot on. She does realize that her son, not that he is plotting, but that he is feeling extremely depressed because of his father's sudden death, as well as her marriage to Claudius. Polonius gives a rambling speech, and he even reads the love letters that Hamlet sent to Ophelia. This is such an invasion of her privacy, and this once again demonstrates that he has absolutely no respect for his daughter. It also demonstrates that he will go to any lengths to ingratiate himself with the king and the queen. Note his speech is filled with digressions and redundant details. He even comments, for goodness sake, on the quality of Hamlet's writing skills. So for the audience, he cuts an absolutely ridiculous figure. Although we realize he's quite intelligent and well-informed, he's utterly tactless, and his verbosity, his tendency to use words unnecessarily and excessively does not endear him to the audience at all. It is Polonius then who proposes that they stage a meeting between Hamlet and Ophelia to spy on them so that he can actually test his theory that Hamlet has gone insane because Ophelia has rejected him. The meeting is then arranged between Polonius and Hamlet, and Polonius speaks to Hamlet, who responds to his statements, and he mentions things like pregnancy and death. And once again, note, he speaks about rots, and on the surface they seem utterly nonsensical. But it is, as the audience, we know that this is a reference to his perception of the general state of decay and rot that exists in Denmark. He also insults Polonius's character. When Polonius asks him, "Do you know me, my lord?" he says, "Excellent, well, you are a fishmonger." Now, a fishmonger is actually slang for brothel keeper. And he implies that Polonius prostitutes his daughter, and this should obviously shock the older man. However, he seems to just take it in his stride and thinks that Hamlet is indeed just insane and sprouting absolute nonsense. The audience, though, is aware, and by now you should be aware, that Hamlet is misogynistic and he judges all women based on his mother's marriage, the fact that his mother married his uncle so soon after her own husband's death. So Hamlet feels extremely betrayed by her. Also, fishmongers were also notorious for their dishonesty. They like to cheat their clients. So he is saying that Polonius is deceitful, it's insulting him, and it pinpoints to us, the audience, that Hamlet is very much aware of what is happening around him. So he realizes that Polonius is not honest, that he's probably using his daughter for some means or other. And then Polonius once again reminds us how astute he is. He says that there is some truth in Hamlet's comments. Though this be madness, yet there is method in it. And he also says how pregnant sometimes his replies are. Be that as it may, he does recognize that there are some truths in what Hamlet says. However, he is so consumed by his own sense of self-importance that he still thinks that Hamlet is insane, and it is as a result of Ophelia's rejection. In Act 2, Hamlet has started with his plan to avenge his father's death. He's now pretended to be insane, and so the plot then now gains momentum. And how does it gain momentum? Because we see Hamlet's engagement with various characters in the drama, so we learn more about Hamlet. We also learn more about the other characters that are introduced. So at this stage, Hamlet feels quite isolated because his mother, he feels, has betrayed him. Ophelia has rejected him. His father is dead, and he feels very much alone. And in this scene, we see that his old friends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern also seem to be quite deceptive because they have been summoned by the king and queen. So Hamlet greets the two characters quite warmly and tells them that Denmark is a prison. They both disagree with that. And after speaking to them, he becomes very suspicious. And he bombards them with questions demanding the reason for the visit. And although they deny it at first, they later admit that they were sent for, because he says, were you not sent for? Is it of your own inclining? Is it a free visitation? Come, come, deal justly with me. Come, come, nay, speak. So he bombards them with questions. Notice there are 3 questions that are thrown at them, and then also he instructs them. It's quite forceful here. And both of them being dupes who do not have the capacity to be deceptive because they depend on each other's opinions. And eventually the reply is, my lord, we were sent for. Again, note the pronoun we when they respond about their actions. They basically speak once again for each other. What we learn about them, we know that they lack the intelligence to actually circumvent Hamlet's interrogation, and they admit that the king and queen had called them to spy on Hamlet. What do we learn about Hamlet? We learn that Hamlet has become quite sharp or astute in political maneuverings and in his dealings with people, because he, of his suspicious nature, I suppose, in the scenario that he's in, is able to pick up in their speech that they were not dealing with him honestly. His 2 friends inform him of the arrival of a troupe of actors. They are called players in the drama, and remember, in those days you would have a troupe, a group of actors traveling across the countryside, and then they would present a drama or poetry or songs and entertain the upper classes. So Hamlet is excited about the arrival of the troupe of actors, and he asks the first player to recite a speech which is based on Greek mythology. And this speech is about the Trojan queen Hecuba's grief when she witnessed her husband Priam being killed by Pyrrhus, who is the son of Achilles. Now, Pyrrhus viciously kills Priam to avenge his father's death. Now, a few years prior to that, Priam had actually killed Achilles. And at this stage, Priam is an old man. That, however, does not stop Pyrrhus. So you can already think, why does Hamlet ask the actors to portray this particular scene? Remember, I made a note, I made a statement earlier. I said that the playwright does not include details which are superfluous or which are redundant. All the details in the drama contribute somehow to the plot or gives us a greater understanding of some of the themes or the issues that the characters face. So note, what is the significance of this particular scene? It is a tale of war, so it reminds us that Denmark is in a warlike state. We have Hamlet, who is at war with his uncle. The story of Pyrrhus's roused vengeance on old grandsire or grandfather Priam extends the theme of revenge. Pyrrhus, like Hamlet, was obligated to avenge his father's death. And therefore Pyrrhus then is a foil for Hamlet. Note, Pyrrhus allows nothing to stop him from killing this old man. He does not feel any remorse for killing this much older man. He simply wants to avenge his father's death. Unlike Hamlet, who is still in the throes of reflection and considering killing his uncle, who is his father's murderer, because he cannot make up his mind or cannot move into action. In essence, then, as mentioned previously, the playwright juxtapositions the characters of Hamlet and Pyrrhus to highlight to us that Hamlet is overthinking the situation and that he has not galvanized himself into action. Hamlet is ruled by inaction and constant reflection on the morality of his actions, whereas Pyrrhus's quest for vengeance is ruled by mindless and unrelenting passion and violence. So it's important to know, why it has been included, but Hamlet is also in his soliloquy, which follows this enactment. He is going to refer to the actor who enacted the role of Pyrrhus, or at least recited the lines from this production. After the player recites those lines, Hamlet privately asks the first player to perform the murder of Gonzago on the following night with some dozen or 16 lines of dialogue that Hamlet has himself inserted. The audience is very much aware that Hamlet is hatching a plan of his own to ascertain Claudius's guilt, and we find that Hamlet is quite a personable individual. He finds it easy to relate to the players and engage them in conversation. We also note that his mood, at least, is quite upbeat compared to his mood in preceding scenes. Once all the characters have left, once again, as in Act 1, Scene 2, Hamlet is left alone on the stage, and he then renders another soliloquy wherein he reveals his disgust with himself for the passion that he cannot muster in order to avenge his father's death. And what he actually says is that the actors can easily simulate intense emotions while he cannot, even though his cause is real. The actor just recited lines from a drama, but he said it with such conviction, with such emotion, that to the audience it seemed real. And Hamlet is frustrated that he cannot muster any of those strong emotions so that he can then kill Claudius and thereby exact revenge. He says, "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. He says, "Yet I, a dull and muddy, mettled rascal, peak like a John a dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing." He says he calls himself dull and muddy, mettled, meaning that he is thinking too much. His mind is in a state of confusion, in a sense that he is unpregnant of his cause. He hasn't been filled with any desire or strong emotions to actually kill Claudius. And he poses a number of questions to himself. He asks, am I a coward? So there is certainly the admission that he feels that he is indeed cowardly because he has not killed Claudius yet. He says, I am pigeon-livered and lack gall. Once again, reinforcing that sense that he is a coward and he lacks the bitterness, the anger to actually commit murder. He even goes as far as saying, why, what an ass am I, what a donkey am I, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must like a whore unpack my heart with words. These are very bitter, very angry words. And note here, Hamlet is not angry with Claudius. He is really angry with himself. He is saying that he also compares himself to a prostitute, a whore that must unpack his heart with words. Note the sexual references that he makes. Once again, reminds us of how women are viewed. And here, it's again that, women are fickle, and he feels that he is not strong enough, and is just like a woman who cannot gather or muster the anger and move over to action and to exact revenge on his father's death. In the preceding lines or slide, Hamlet's anger was directed at himself. In the subsequent lines, he now once again turns his eye and his mind to Claudius. He curses him passionately. He calls him a bloody, bawdy villain, a remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. Let's look at the word bloody. Bloody refers to the fact that he committed murder. The words bawdy and lecherous speaks to somebody who is who engages in rampant sexual activity and who is lustful. So whenever Hamlet refers to Claudius or his mother, he always uses these words which indicates rampant sexuality and lust. So once again, we see his bitterness and anger, that, you know, he sees Claudius as a rutting animal, a beast, a satyr. Claudius shows no remorse for killing his brother and marrying his brother's wife. He is also treacherous because he betrayed Hamlet as well as his own brother by murdering him. The use of sexual allusions highlights Hamlet's disgust with his mother, who was given a body, to Claudius. Note the plosive b and the jerky ch sounds, as well as the sibilant s sounds. All of these sounds, when they are combined, serve to reinforce the deep-seated anger and disgust that Hamlet has for Claudius. This particular soliloquy is quite long. So what does it demonstrate to us? It demonstrates Hamlet's sense of isolation and his loneliness. And this is ironic because Hamlet is at court, and normally at court there are numerous individuals in an official or non-official capacity. He is deeply ashamed that he cannot spur himself into action and honor his promise to the ghost. So just to recap, note his sense of isolation and ultimately his shame because he cannot commit to actually murdering Claudius. Is he a coward, or do we understand his situation? Indeed, he also thinks about his religious obligations, and this is something that might hamper his decision ultimately. In the first part of the soliloquy, Hamlet is presenting to the audience his dilemma and his frustrations because he cannot act and bring himself to physically, literally avenge his father's death. However, at the end of the soliloquy, Hamlet seems to have made up his mind and has put into action a plan to determine whether Claudius is guilty or not. And what does this plan consist of? He'll have the players show a scene similar to Claudius's murder of his father. And he says that the only reason for his hesitation is the fact that he has absolutely no real proof that Claudius is guilty, and he is not sure whether the ghost has an evil intention or whether it is honorable and is indeed the spirit of his deceased father. He, however, resolves that if Claudius shows any sign, any small sign of guilt, then he will use that and take it as evidence of regicide, meaning the killing of a king or monarch, and fratricide, that refers to the act of killing a brother. And we know that Claudius is guilty of both of these acts. So he resolves and he says, I'll have the players play something of the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks. If he but blench, I know my course. So what does the word blench mean? The word blench means to flinch. And flinching is a small little facial expression. So he says that he will examine Claudius's face and reaction very closely. And if he sees anything that indicates that Claudius is guilty, he will take it as the truth. He also, at the end of this particular scene, and indeed the act, he ends it off with a catchy little statement, and he says, the play is the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. So in these two lines, then it's very catchy. It reminds us that Hamlet, it's kind of, he seems more upbeat, more energetic in this couplet, and he seems more resolute, determined to act. If we reflect on events in this particular act and what we've learned of the characters, we have learned that Polonius is self-serving. He is intent on ingratiating himself with Claudius in order to maintain his position, and as a result he plots and schemes on behalf of as well as with the king. We also learn that Hamlet's procrastination is simply a way of Hamlet avoiding taking action. Now, we need to contextualize it. In the 1600s, it was believed that the king was the embodiment of God, and by murdering the king, well, it was a blasphemous action. So Claudius indeed has disrupted the chain of being and has caused chaos and corruption in the kingdom of Denmark. And so obviously Hamlet has to set this right. We also realize that Gertrude uses Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to try and save her son from melancholy. However, Claudius's intentions are much more wicked or nefarious, because he wants to spy on Hamlet so that he can ensure that the prince is not a threat to his crown and his position as monarch of Denmark. We also at the end of this play know that Hamlet has finally made some decisive action and is planning to confirm Claudius's guilt by requesting the players to reenact his father's murder. So we're well aware that if indeed Hamlet has now resolved that if Claudius but blench, then he will know what to do and then he will be forced to act. So well aware that the action is going to intensify in Act 3.